with the patient. So I think imposter syndrome, definitely I'll cover this in the talk, it's basically fear. It's a type of fear. Elizabeth Gilbert has a lovely phrase that it's just fear in high heels. And I think when you name it as such, then you can start to face it. Because with all fears, they like to be kept in dark places and ignored and allowed to develop into bogeymen. It's only when you name them and go, okay, what is this that I'm looking at? Start talking about it, and that really that's what I'm about with everything. Let's bring these things out in the open. Let's turn the light on. Let's talk about them so that we take their power away, and then you can start to be braver and really just be the human that you are.
Absolutely. I think that's such an interesting phenomena that I think is why it's like the touch paper on conversation. People starting to recognise it, admit to it in themselves. And we spoke on this podcast with your friend Margaret about that, and it was really fascinating and definitely one that will be a continuing theme, I can see. The next thing then into burnout, I worry a little, and it sounds like it's something you share, about the fact that it misses the burning out. It misses that phase. It misses that process. It sort of sometimes it imply as well that's a fire that'd be hard to put out, when really there are so many different factors affecting it. Because the conversation, I noticed that for some reason our chat on Restream isn't working properly, unfortunately, so I can't pull them up. But I've noticed one from, have you got some that you can see? But there's one that's there from Richard Sutherland that speaks to what I wanted to ask, really, is that it is often this, it's neither either or, really, I don't think, but burnout or reduced resilience. So this idea in which when done badly, the accusation of reduced resilience means that then it puts too much, when we know there are going to be so many systemic factors affecting people that aren't controllable, and how factors like that to accuse someone of reduced resilience when that happens, it feels like a bad analysis. But then similarly, we do end up having a degree of resilience that we need to sustain as a means of being able to interact with society without it squashing us. Never mind a work role of which then is sometimes high pressured. So I just wondered if I could invite your sort of thoughts on that balance.
Yeah, resilience has had such a bad press, hasn't it, in the last few years? And you're right, used as a criticism and a weapon, particularly at the stage where somebody is potentially burning out, is completely insensitive and the wrong way to approach it. But I guess relating a bit to what we were saying about imposter syndrome, to be resilient, you have to be flexible and adaptable. And I wonder whether that's some of what we lose when we start to burn out. So we feel threatened in situations like being in a global pandemic, and possibly we default to the safe mechanisms and the more rigid way of behaving, rather than our usual way of flexing and adapting to changing situations. But you're right that to say burnout or reduced resilience is relevant, but there are so many other factors. Just the definitions of burnout, that the WHO has one definition, which is just that it's unaddressed workplace stress. But then more commonly, you see this kind of 3-tier description these days, which is emotional overload, reduced sense or depersonalization, which you could interpret as compassion fatigue, and a reduced sense of your own efficacy. Now, my friend Susanna Pecci, who's going to be on the panel, she says that actually, particularly depersonalization is an absolute critical factor in PTSD, and that possibly burnout is a form of PTSD. So there's this whole kind of soup and of different, almost bits plucked of other conditions and dumped into this burnout bucket, if you like. And I'm not sure it's helpful. And you raise a fair point that I'm not sure that burnout picks up the people along the way.
Or at least not every phase of that, because it's so unique and individualized, and some people it's quicker, and sometimes it's like watching a slow car crash. But it varies, doesn't it, so much? When you were selecting, because this is the thing, is that there are certain things, certainly your keynote, where it was just like, we need want Joe to deliver that. Whereas with the panel, you obviously are invited to have a significant creative control over the makeup of that and the tone and tenor of it. Who did you choose and why?
Yeah, good question. So I wanted people who had some professional knowledge of the not just burnout, but definitions of various conditions. And also I was very open when I invited the people that I wanted people who had some personal experience of it. Now that's possibly a high risk strategy. We'll see how it goes on Friday. But
Yeah.
It's a boundary that I feel I can work within. And I think this is a subject that if you just stick to technical language rather than personal experience, it's not going to deliver on any depth, and it's not going to move us forward to the place where basically we want people to be able to recognize within themselves and possibly colleagues what are the subtle things to look for. So it's I hope it's going to be thought-provoking and it's potential for being a really powerful session if handled sensitively, and that's my responsibility.
Of course, yeah, high pressure. Now, one of the things that then I said in the title sequence and we've mentioned already is that you've got a few hats you're wearing. Now, fundamentally, I don't like that expression in this instance because they're not distinct hats. There might be slight different feathers in the cap, but you kind of you as Joe Turner and you as a representative of MIHAB, as well as then a partner of ours. It's such an integrated process now, and you've been with us for a few months and know how things work. Such a compatibility of values means that you're just then an obvious person to then be involved, not just as a speaker, but then as a moderator. And so one of the things that you've then given, which is definitely more of a speaker focus, but you've been giving these social media sort of diary entries and points that you're making for people. And it's definitely in various different circumstances, many of which we're going to be unpacking more in future shows, and the conversation will no doubt go on. But what made you do it? But also, what are the circumstances that surround your day that's coming up, and how do you manage those?
First part of your question, why did I do it? Because I always want to present a real face. And I think particularly, not just being a therapist, but more particularly going into the world of coaching, there's a real danger, even if you don't put yourself in this place, that other people might put you in the place of being the sorted person. And that might be nice and comforting for a little while, but it isn't true, and it isn't helpful to the potential recipient of that kind of support, because it gives the impression that you are aiming for this perfect place where everything is wonderful and you handle every situation with grace and dignity and nothing ever bothers you. So I wanted to present that absolutely isn't the case with me. The things that I've put out in my diary of a Therapy Live speaker are not things that I've gone through the coaching book and thought, which things should I bring up today? I've literally woken up and gone, right, what worry is going around my head today? And I guess the most important part of those posts is that I've put the thought and then I've put the reframe, and that's the difference. So, in the past, I might have stayed in that ruminating place of just being worried about tech or worrying what people will think about me. And I think the only difference now is that I'll go, okay, name it then. What is it that's worrying you? Let's look it in the eye and let's see what the actual truth of that is and how we can reframe it. And I hope by putting those things out, it might help some of the other moderators or people that might be thinking of speaking or coming on podcasts and things in the future. And yeah, it helps me. It's made me reframe the little worries that I'm having.
Well, that's the thing. It's so authentic, and it's really a genuine emergence from your thoughts. You're giving us a peek into those diary entries. I think one of the things that I've reflected on, not just from that, but obviously from conversations with you and many others that we're working with as we've bolstered the moderating team to try and make sure that the event's less frantic, and also for us wanting to reach out to our wider network that we know, trust, love, and we want their work to be brought into this. And you're such a good example of someone that moderating and guiding conversation is something you're passionate about. When you've got that the coaching element to it that so many of our team really value. It just seems that it's such a match made in heaven for you and many others that we've kind of got involved. It does, though, bring with it an extra pressure. And then when you're allowing emotions to emerge and reframing them, there is then also the factor that to some degree, some of those tasks, some of those pressures, there is a support that needs to be shared from me and my team to make sure that these things don't overburden. And I think that I wanted to just reflect with you on that balancing act is a fascinating one, and one that we take incredibly seriously. And we don't necessarily always know, we definitely don't want to be coddling and compressing and scripting and then misshaping important and special characters to us. That's the sort of tenor, we'd lose the tenor of the event. But then similarly, if people felt overexposed, under-supported, and that would be mortified at that as well, because you're then not going to get the best out of people, but also they're not going to have a good experience that they could otherwise have had and enjoyed that experience. So it's such a funny balance. In this instance, I'm not going to invite as to whether or not we've got that right. I'm just sort of meaning that, is that the tug of war when it comes to things like all the things we're talking about, imposter syndrome, burnout, resilience? Is that the trade-off? How supportive can the environment be, and how resilient do I need to be? Is that the constant thing?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, for what it's worth, the support is pitched really well in that you are. So my biggest worry was tech, and I'm not awful at tech, but I just want to get it right. But I want to get it right so that I can do what you actually want from me, which is to be entertaining and inspiring and challenging. And I'd be so upset if I got so bogged down in the tech that I couldn't be what you need us moderators to be on that day, because that's what makes a great experience. But equally, if you were to mollycoddle us and you give us every last instruction, it would be mind-blowing and probably make us even more nervous. But you would probably kill some of the stuff that you are trying to nurture and bring out. So yeah, it's totally a thin line, isn't it, between making sure that people have the structure in place, but the freedom to be who they are individually.
No, good. Well, and thank you for that, because that's really reassuring for me, especially at this stage of the day. It's important that we're sort of at least being seen to attempt to toe that line. I'm glad to hear for you we are doing it well. I want to just try and make sure that we put the event and its timing into context as well, Joe, if we can. And one of the things that I really wanted to ask you about, we've been fascinated by how last year's Therapy Live event was in the thick of lockdown 1. Towards the tail of it, perhaps, but just generally speaking, a fascinating, unique moment in time for the world in such a way that, people were locked in their homes, and it meant that then, of course, we all know everyone turned up and it crashed our site for a bit in the morning, which won't happen again, I promise. But the world is in a different place now, and there is an air of optimism. There is, though, the challenges that faces, whereby people are then feeling like they're obliged to be more productive, feeling like they're obliged to sometimes then be wanting to engage socially at 100%, because some people are that way out personality-wise, and they're just wanting to now that we're legally allowed to, let's just be around more people, and it just seems to be then this wave of social obligation that seems to have swept over it, and that applies both personally and professionally. So people are then thinking, well, is this appropriate for a virtual conference? Really, we should just be biding our time to get together in person, and really that moment has come and gone. And so I just wondered what your thoughts are on the timing, not just of the event, but just where we're up to, and how people you work with need to be sort of guided through those obligations I spoke about.
There is a lot of pressure, isn't there? I don't think the timing of an online conference is wrong. You don't think we're there yet where we can really look forward and fully imagine being together in big groups. And it would also be a shame to lose some of the benefits that have come with online education. And to be honest, the most common comment I hear is, "Oh, I love it because I don't have to pay for a hotel, I don't have to travel," all the things that have been said lots and lots of times. But equally, I know lots of people can't be there on Friday and they can catch up afterwards, and that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were getting to this at all, Jack, in your comment, but it just occurred to me when you were talking that 10 streams of speakers. I wanted to say to people, for goodness sake, don't get imposter syndrome being the recipient of all this. That would be awful. Sometimes when you sit there, I guess this is the backup of why I put those posts out there, because I think you tend to watch people and think, oh gosh, they've got this, they've got that, they're all together, they're delivering this work, they're just amazing. I could never be that. And yeah, that would be awful to actually be enhancing that imposter syndrome. And I think, to get to your point, for some reason, this new style of delivery of CPD seems to be more accessible and more real, and less. It seems to be moving away from the guru culture, which is absolutely music to my ears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we're hoping so. And I think as well, there are people that do. We've tried, especially with our new interface on our own website, therapy-live.co.uk. We've really tried to make sure that it doesn't feel overwhelming. There's a lot going on. Don't be shy to have a break. You've not got some of the downsides of in-person conferences. You might be there as a group and someone grabs you by the shoulder, let's not miss this session and stuff. And it's just like, well, no, my head's a bit full. And I know it's not technically a break time and it does sound good, but I know I need to maintain my composure. Sometimes you've got that peer pressure that can come with that, whereas hopefully being behind a screen and you can schedule some breaks, schedule some moments for reflection, know that they are available then, recorded after the fact, if that's a session you really want to do justice to. And also I'd encourage you to think on your feet as well, is that you might plan your day and then it starts to start to feel overwhelming. You think, I'm not going to get much out of this afternoon. Then have an extended lunch break, go for a bit of a wander and stuff. Don't get too sucked into the hashtag, right? We want it to be, for those that want it, a fully immersive experience where someone might just be like, right, from 6 while 6, I'm just in amongst it, right? I'm locked into the matrix, right? And we love that. And there's an atmosphere that can be really conducive to that being good if you're that way out. But we don't want that to feel like the obligation, like you need to make sure that every minute you're on it. And we're needing to make sure we say that to our moderator teams as well, is that, there's something to be said for trying to manage your energy over time. But these are, and we hope to be, a cultural moment again in MSK practice, which we're really proud of the quality of the material that we're producing and the conversations that we're able to do. We've been able to diversify content. So last year's sessions were samey in their format, although, of course, very varied in their content. Whereas, as Jo's just described, her sessions being a keynote and 2 panels, especially the panels of which she's describing, are very much a wide and open discourse amongst really interesting people with really rich lived experience that they bring to that and difference. And so I'm so excited to what we can bring together, and it's so close now. Final question for you, Jo, is: are there other sessions? I know you're going to be busy, and we hopefully have picked moderating sessions for you outside of your other speaking duties that you're likely to enjoy. We did that on purpose and also contribute to as a moderator. Were there any other sessions that you've looked at that you're like, that's definitely on my list to visit after the fact?
Well, actually, the one you put me on as a moderator is probably one that I'm really interested in, how we learn. I watched Ash's little Twitter video and that's really... I'm going to have to make sure I pay attention because I'll be listening closely to what he says. And I guess this is going to sound, well, I hope it sounds okay, but I'm actually interested in the people on the core skills and the MSKR stream, because that's kind of where my head is now.
Right.
10 years ago, I'd have been all about the detailed knee talks and the specific skills that I was going to acquire and develop in those people. But these days, for me, it is about what's going on in the profession and how do we develop our personal core skills. So I probably will be sort of stuck in those 2 streams.
Sure, no, I can understand that. Yeah, it's career phases and stuff, isn't it? There that makes sense, and I can certainly vouch for that's a stream with the MSKR one that I've been so much more involved in than some of the clinical ones, and it's a special one. And again, lots of really interesting conversations about some of the hottest topics in the game, as well as, and I think I'm really pleased with this in the MSKR stream, is that we are then posing and offering you a chance to be involved in some of the proposed solutions, right? We've done a lot of analysis. It's a think tank after all. We're not going to apologise for that. But we've also come up with a few schemes that we think are going to help to correct some of that record, and there's ways in which you can be involved in it. So a couple of big announcements on the show. So I totally agree, and I think I feel the same way when I think about what sessions it is that I'm going to be to rush to listen back to. It's going to be those ones, that big picture stuff that I think we're both really passionate about. But thank you so much as ever for your involvement. Thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate it. Just remind people once more where they can find out more about you, especially your website and social media links, if you could.
So they can find me at my website is mehab.co.uk, and my Twitter handle is mehab_Joe, and I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit, just under Joe Turner.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. And yeah, good luck. Not that you need it for Friday, and we'll speak soon.
You too.
Cheers, mate. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.